Welcome to Chart Chat. In this series, we look at the subject's chart for the first time and share our initial reactions. This is not meant to be a comprehensive dive into the chart, but rather an intuitively led discussion of our first impressions and what we know about the person already. So this is Kanye West's natal chart. He was born June 8th, 1977 at 8:45 a.m. in Atlanta, Georgia. That makes him a Gemini sun, a Pisces moon, and a Cancer rising with an Aries midheaven, Libra north node. He's got a lot going on in the 10th house. He's got a lot going on in general, in his natal chart, in his life, in his mind, I think, in his heart. He's got a lot going on. He's a very interesting individual. And I feel like the shape of his aspects, like these lines kind of here in the center, that's a good metaphor for Kanye's energy field overall. It's a clusterfuck. There's just no other way to even say it, that like he's just very multifaceted. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into all those facets.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely, like, starting with Gemini, that's a word I love to use to describe Gemini as multifaceted, because Gemini can get a bad rap, which I think is super unfair, but like, I mean, yeah, like there's many sides to him. He probably loves a good argument. Like, I feel like Gemini makes a good lawyer, like that type of energy, of like, just like wanting to talk about all different things, be around all different kinds of people, like wanting diversity in your life and having that going on inside of your mind too. A lot.
To have the sun that close to Jupiter in Gemini all by itself is like a powerful amplifier for your brain. Like Gemini is the messenger of the gods, like the openness where we are open to receiving thoughts and downloads from the energy around us. So when you have Jupiter in Gemini, your ability to receive out of the wavelengths of the air is crazy. And he's got the sun right there next to his Jupiter in Gemini. So that reminds me especially of his, like, the lyrics, so many lyrics that just come through him all the time. Like back when he was a producer, like when he was very first starting out, he wanted to be a rapper. He wanted to like be the one who's like singing the original songs or rapping the original lyrics or whatever. He wanted his like artist point of view to be heard. And I think that's one thing that like he may come off like a crazy person sometimes, and we want to talk more about that later, but he's got a point of view. He's got a message. He's got a pretty clear thread through his work, as far as like he's got something to say. He's not just putting out fluff. He's really trying to say something with his work.
Definitely. And I can see too in there like kind of an expansion of the sense of self and like expansion of his ego, having Jupiter right there with his sun. And I mean, that could come off as like a sense, like a high sense of self-importance, or just like, I mean, honestly, like having a big ego, which of course there can be, like, if you're in the public eye, you're a famous person, like you kind of have to have that. So like that serves him well in that case. But then, like having a big ego is maybe not the best thing all the time, maybe not great for your personal relationships, or coming off as being like personable or approachable or relatable, like maybe not so much. He's also got a lot going on in Aries. Aries being in the 10th house is really interesting to me, of like Aries kind of being that like all about me sort of energy, like, yeah, which serves us so well in so many ways. Like you have to focus on yourself and to care about yourself. But for that to be in the 10th house in the realm of like the public eye is like he wants to be seen for sure. And he wants all eyes on him. He wants attention. That's what I see for sure.
makes so much sense with the Aries midheaven. He's also got like all this in his 10th house, which is, yes, a need for attention. Plus, that's his south node. So, really, like his soul's purpose is down here in Libra, in home, in quiet, internal nurturing, which I don't know if he's made it to that stage yet, but he's got other things that he's doing. Because, like, when you talk about all of this up here, kind of being at odds with, like, especially this square with his Pisces moon, his like emotional need to connect with the collective. And that is like exactly square. It's at odds with this over exaggerated sense of your own curiosity, your own internal entertainment of yourself versus like your genuine care for the collective, which I do believe he has on like a very real level. But you see like that Pisces moon is, it's maybe even more at odds with his other things than it is helping. The
Yeah.
only things it's helping is his emotional intensity. It's like hooking up between the moon in Pisces, his Cancer rising, and this Uranus in Scorpio. So he's got this just grand trine, and that can be kind of sticky for people to get stuck in a comfort zone and just kind of loop in that place. So yeah, that's, emotions run right on the surface for him. And I think it makes a lot of sense that like his midheaven, his professional face is fire energy with Aries, and his social face is Cancer. It's water with his rising sign there. So he's got a lot going on.
Wow. I mean, I really don't mean to compare him to OJ Simpson. I only say this because we talked about him really recently. So it's still fresh in my mind. But he also had a Pisces moon and a lot of water energy. And so definitely with OJ, we saw like a lot of the dark side of water energy. And I don't think there's a whole lot, there's a little bit of Scorpio in his chart, and it does dip into the fourth house as well, which is also similar to OJ a little bit there. But like, you know, like there's emotions going on inside of this being. I think that's same with OJ, same with Kanye here, where like there's this emotional depth that I think through Kanye has found expression, you know, like he's an artist. Makes sense. And then with OJ, it really never found a healthy expression. Obviously, I think in the end it came out in like the worst way possible. But at least with Kanye, we can see like he has a lot of emotional energy that like he's an artist, you know, he expresses it. And whether it comes out through like kind of an arrogant, ego-based way, like
Yeah.
he's an artist, you know.
Well, and like adding to his like need for attention, he's also got Saturn down here in Leo in his second house. And that is trining this Aries midheaven. It's sextiling all this Gemini energy. It's also sextiling this Libra, Pluto down here. That Saturn feels really significant to me. And Leo wants to shine. Leo wants to be seen. Leo, like, and the fact that it's his Saturn, it reminds me of like in his story, there was a real stage like the before where he was only a producer. Nobody wanted to like take his songs seriously. They just wanted his sound for them to like lay down for their song. So he wanted to like come out and like be the one, like be the one out there. And there was this like holding back part, and then there was the releasing part. And right around that time was when he like had his first big break, and then he got in a car accident like right after that, and he had his jaw wired shut for several months. It might have even been like 6 or 8 months he had his jaw wired shut, and he made an album that was called like Through the Wire or something like that, like through the something, where he like rapped it with his mouth wired shut. I'm pretty sure. We're gonna have to double check that, but yeah, because like that feels like, and what he took from that was God can grant you success, and God can just as easily take it all away like the instant later. It like happened in really close succession. The like one of his songs hit like the Billboard top whatever, and then he had that car accident and like a really long painful healing process. But I think in the end he was much more grateful for his success and hopefully more grounded in that. It seemed like a really impactful experience.
Wow. So you said that was a car accident, right?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
I'm a really, really strong believer in like the mind, body, soul connection. And the fact that he gets in a car accident and of all potential ramifications of that, he ends up with a jaw injury impeding his expression, like his ability to speak and, rap or whatever it is, like to say words or sing. And like that, I mean, that's so interesting to me because like that was what what you're saying is that's ultimately what he wanted was, for like his to be the one who is like rapping or singing his own lyrics. And then he gets this little roadblock of like, now your mouth is literally wired shut. What are you going to do? He's like, I'm going to use this obstacle to like prop myself up instead. So he was given this opportunity to like how bad do you want it? Fight for it, so interesting.
Right. And like it makes me want to, well, I guess like this. Okay. So Through the Wire is
That's
what
Teddy
it's
Bear.
called.
Oh.
Crazy. And like look at he's like, I drank a boost for breakfast and Ensure for dessert. Yeah. Released in 2004. Yes. So let's look back at transits from October 2002, because like I said, like it was both. It was huge success and it was this experience. So that was 20 years ago. Holy moly, not quite 20 years ago. So this is very interesting to me because like this moves backwards. So it has just finished coming through the sun and Jupiter. And that, I mean, makes a lot of sense with like his songs where his music was like just becoming popular. The North Node crossing over your sun, over your Jupiter, like big blessings are happening. But then also something else must be, interesting. Jupiter on his Saturn, back to the Saturn in Leo. How bad do you want it? And like you said, like he freaking made an album from inside having his jaw wired shut. He wants it. He wants it real bad. He proved it. Like nobody could ever say that. Plus you got down here, these two, well, this one, I think Mars is back up here. And so it would have been like coming through there pretty soon. And then Mercury was basically right on his Pluto. Pluto's lined up pretty much exactly with his Neptune.
I noticed too, the moon is right on his Chiron. And I know the moon moves pretty quickly, but wow. There's a lot of like almost direct conjunctions.
Yeah.
It seemed like a pretty powerful time for him. There was a lot going on, probably a lot of pressure, and then also a lot of like kind of blessings and that sort of energy too. A lot of both kind of propelling him forward. He definitely took adversity and like made it, like that launched him into success. And I think that is very often the case. It seems to me that that's often like the way that the universe works, is it's from some of your darkest places that you find your light, and that you're able to find that motivation and that whatever lights your fire to drive you for success, to doing the thing that you're meant to do.
Well, and speaking of his darkest times, it makes me want to Google when his mom died. Kanye. Because like that unraveled him, it seems like. She was like his biggest advocate. And I mean, he basically says that he wouldn't have had the music career that he had if it wasn't for her. He wrote songs about her, maybe even a whole album, I forget. And he pretty much fell to pieces when she passed. And so it made me really curious about usually pretty much everything that's like emotionally really hard or traumatic in our lives can be lined up with some type of astrological stress that we're under at that time. And the negative experience is just the healing kind of presenting itself in that moment. And loss reminds me of Scorpio. Oh, this is also very interesting. Uranus being like exactly on his moon, and Uranus moves really slowly. It's also retrograding, meaning it's moving past his moon and then it's going to come back and cover his moon again. Like those years after his mom died, he was like a whole different person there for a while. And so that's definitely very interesting because that would line up with the time frame of his recovery taking a couple years, that transformation lasting that long.
Yep.
What
Yeah,
else
that makes
do
a
we
lot of sense. Oh, and there is all that energy in Scorpio at the time. Wait, so
the
yeah,
sun and the moon? It was a new moon in Scorpio, which is where his natal Uranus is. And then Uranus is up here messing with his Pisces moon. So yeah, very, very much pointing us back, which they're trining too. So like, yeah, it feels like, and that's exactly what it did. It stirred his water energy deep. Like he was in pain. Like you could just feel it in everything that he did. And he lashed out a lot and he did a lot of things that people wanted to hate on him for. But there was genuine pain coming through all of it. And so that makes a lot of sense where I mean, Pisces energy, the whole goal of Pisces energy is transcendence and to let go and to like rise above the human existence and the pain that goes along with that hand in hand and remember our spirit nature. And when we're in extreme physical pain, that is a catalyst for rising us back up to who we really are, which is our spirit nature. So, I mean, based on what I know about him, which is not much, it seems like losing his mom was one of those most painful experiences that he's ever gone through. So that's
yeah,
interesting that at that time he's got all that happening.
yeah. And I do wonder, like, what year is this? 2007. I wonder if he released albums around this time. And if like, because I mean, what a way to transmute painful energy, like
He
into art. You know, artistry is one of the most, I don't know. It's a really beautiful way to turn pain and turn darkness into light and make something beautiful out of it.
see this one, Donda, I think was her name. So
Right.
that's like a whole album that's for her. And
Oh,
I
I guess 2010, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which his music, like, I was somewhat tuned into Kanye West at this time. Oh, wait, 808s and Heartbreak is 2008. Okay, so there's that. And then 2010 is My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. But this here is the closest
yeah.
to the
There you
actual.
go.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember those two songs, Heartless and Love Lockdown. Those were like very popular at the time.
Yeah.
And he's talking about, look, like loneliness, heartbreak, like very emotional subjects. Like he is taking this pain, which I'm sure stirred up a whole lot of other pain that's also in there because that's what these kind of situations do. And he took it and he used it for art, which is that's really cool, honestly.
Well, and like as you talk about taking your pain and using it constructively, that to me sounds like the archetype of Chiron, which is opposite his Uranus in Scorpio. So, like, opposite, you come up here to his Chiron at 4 degrees Taurus. Plus, he's got Venus and Mars at 2 and 1. They're like so close, it looks like one blue line. All of that in the early degrees of Taurus, where Taurus is like our ability. Oh, plus he's got his Mercury in Taurus, but that's over here. So Taurus is our ability to like feel safe and secure in the physical world. And when you have a hard hit to your emotional self, it can be like you're trapped under the water, like swirling in a tidal wave, and you can't even tell which way is up. Like there's no physical safety, there's no physical orientation. And that's what it feels like. Like he got triggered massively on this end of the spectrum. And it took him years to climb back up here to like, I mean, yes, the process of the music and all of that was like a means of let me ground back into the physical and do something with this, like give it to the world, that 10th house side of it. So yeah, that Taurus energy, I think he just kind of lost track of it there for a while. And it really did seem like that, like he was just spinning. He was not grounded, and that, yeah.
Yeah. And then to create, I guess, like to take that feeling and to create something concrete, like an album, like that's super earth energy to me. That sounds pretty Virgo, honestly. I don't know if he's got even anything in Virgo. I guess that's his
third house.
third house. Oh, I mean, associated with communication, I guess that makes sense. Like, I always say it's Virgo energy to like have a YouTube channel and to like record videos and like put them on your channel. Like, it's a whole process, you know, of like taking your thoughts and your creativity and making it into something real that other people can experience. And like, that's what he did with this pain and this feeling of being lost and upside down, is like he created an album. Multiple albums, I'm sure, came from like stem in this pain, and like he created something concrete that can be shared with other people. So it seems to me like maybe that's how he kind of found his footing again.
Yeah.
Do that.
Well, and like, so at that time, this again is still November 2007, Saturn was transiting in Virgo. So that was the collective energy of the time. And for him, that's in his third house of communication. So, yeah, I mean, to have something that's that emotionally charged, like there's nothing more difficult to try to communicate than a big pile of emotional tidal wave. And he did. He figured out how to like break it down. And that Saturn through that house, I mean, Saturn stays in a sign for like 2.5 years. So that was probably a solid 2 years that Saturn was working through that, which makes sense with the 2008 release of the heartbreak thing. That was him like organizing it into something that could go and be released. And yeah, to transmute, like that's really all you can ever do with your pain, is turn it into something else.
Yeah. And that starts in like feeling it and being in it.
Yeah.
It's funny too, like you use the word title, because it reminds me of, I'm gonna have to double check myself on this, but I'm pretty sure it's Kanye West and Jay-Z who started like the music platform called Tidal.
I think you're right.
And that's kind of funny. I mean, that's kind of Virgo energy too, of like, I'm gonna like create my own music platform that I think is like an improvement upon the other ones that already exist. Like an actual platform for music. It's like, not only am I going to create music and albums, but I'm going to create an entire like house for them and other artists to put their music in, and going to charge like more money for it, of course, but that's a whole other conversation.
Right. Well, he's got some massive Taurus energy.
Yeah.
And that Chiron in Taurus is like, you just can't feel secure in the physical world. Like, no matter how much you have in the bank, around you, physical possessions, like Chiron in Taurus feels like, I don't have enough. I don't have enough to feel secure yet. I need more physical stuff. That's like this fear, this deep wound of like, you just don't have physical security. And it's, I mean, I got a lot the same thing going on, where he also has a lot of Taurus energy. His Mars and Venus are conjunct, which we're going through that right now. They're in Capricorn. But to have your divine masculine, divine feminine conjunct in the same sign is a great alignment of ability in that area. Plus his Mercury is in Taurus as well. So like his mind is just wired that way, like physical things. And then you got Chiron right in the middle of all of it, to where it's a bottomless pit. Like he could be the richest guy on the planet, he'd probably feel insecure still. Like that wound runs deep for us all. Like Chiron is, you know, maybe not even possible to fully heal. So you just gotta wonder, like that, where his legacy will just likely never be big enough for him. He'll just constantly keep pushing himself up that ladder. Plus you have Jupiter conjunct the sun. Like those kinds of placements where he's got big work. I mean, I don't think he's wrong that he's got big work to do. Like this energy pushes him to continue to put himself out there, to continue to innovate, to continue to invent the next version of who he is. Like he's just so creative. And just like, it just is funny. Like I was watching this documentary by a creator on YouTube that I really like called Jay Aubrey. And basically, I'll watch whatever he puts out, even if I don't have any idea who the person is. I knew who Kanye was, but I watched the 2-hour documentary of his life and his work and all of that. And it's like he has really changed the whole genre of hip hop. He's like redefined it a couple of times because as soon as everybody starts doing what he's doing, he's like over here doing the next thing. And then they copy that and he's over here doing the next thing. Like he's just inventive as all get out. And that, as I use those words, it's like, yeah, he's got midheaven in a cardinal sign. He's got his rising sign in a cardinal sign. Like he is born to create. That's just the cross of who he is like make. It's a heartbeat that goes on inside of him.
My goodness, and that expanded ego right there with the Jupiter right aligned with his sun is like he thinks, and I'm sure he's right, that like he's the guy, like he's made a lot of controversial statements about like basically seeing himself as being like godlike, which is, for most of us to hear that, it's like
weird.
But like, I mean, really, like he has big things to do and he knows it. Like maybe he takes it a little too far in the way he talks about it sometimes, but
does he?
Like,
is that supposed to be
true.
Are we meant whatever he wants. This? Like he's got this all connected. Like it's so weird okay, so Sun and Jupiter in Gemini is working with his Saturn in Leo, is working with his Pluto in Libra, and all of that goes back to his Gemini. So like all of that energy is very distinctly tied together. Plus he's got a T square coming off of all that Taurus energy back to this Saturn, another T square off the Scorpio end back to the Saturn, like, which would again trigger this loop of energy. Like, so it's just a dominant piece of who he is. And all of that, this expanded ego, this job, this Saturn daily mission of self-love, essentially, and cultivating your inner light. And this Pluto in Libra, which is a deep, especially next to his IC, it's a deep root of a sense of personal injustice to him that's fueling like this message that he has. It's coming from like a deeply personal place, So I mean, I don't doubt that in his mind, in his experience, in his internal version of reality, he probably does feel like he's God. And are we supposed to hear that right now? Is diversity divinely intended? Is he wrong to have come to this conclusion? Isn't everybody right to come to whatever conclusion they have about their own identity? In our last episode, we just talked about Raven Simone, and like she has come to some powerful personal conclusions about her identity. And again, I say the same thing here. Like, why can't he say he's God? Why? I mean, like, to a certain extent, you're right. He sounds nuts. And is he? I don't think it really matters. Like, does that help him to see himself that way, to do this big, grand work that he's clearly meant to do? He's got a lot of energy, like up here in this quadrant where your energy is meant to interact with the energy of the collective. So his uniqueness it's intended to, ripple and see what happens. How does that help us each get more clear about who we are?
Definitely, because I mean, from a more broadly spiritual perspective, like we are all extensions of God and God energy, however you see that. And so maybe instead of looking at that and being like, this guy is crazy, you can look at yourself and think, in what ways am I godlike? And how can I use that power inside of myself to create important things in this world? Because I think it also could be important to note that like his Jupiter, they're splitting between the 11th and 12th house, and his Jupiter is in the 11th house, which has a lot to do with like the collective and collective energy. And so like maybe by inflating his own ego in this way, which was, a purposeful design for his astrology to be this way. Yeah. I know you believe in that too. That like maybe this is him doing that is almost like he's setting an example for the rest of us, to the collective, that like we're all really powerful, we really are. He's just been a pretty public example of it. And he's overcome a lot in his life to kind of achieve that stature and to find that within himself.
Yeah.
He's overcome a lot of odds.
Which again takes me back to Chiron and Taurus, and the fact that that's in his 10th house. It's like that personal healing of his own security, his own sense of not enoughness, like it being in the 10th house is like, that's part of his legacy. Like he has, I mean, 4 planets, 4 things in the 10th house. Like he's got a big legacy to leave behind. And
Yeah.
usually people that do, it's like everybody's a mirror. You know, you and I talk about that all the time. And it's like, what are we seeing in the mirror of Kanye West? You know, let him serve you, let him illuminate your world a little bit more brightly. Like that Gemini, Jupiter, and Sun, like he's naturally going to see the world in a different way. Gemini is like the most detached of all the signs, like the most emotionally uninvolved with the reality of what is. And yet he's got all these wicked emotions going on inside of him, which has got to be a whirlwind reality if I ever did see one. But all of that detachment gives him a perspective that he's bound to say something that pulls at the thread of something. Yep. And probably each of us are going to hear exactly what we need to hear from it. So, you know, yeah, he's got a message of some sort. And whether that's good or bad, I think it's helpful either way for us to get clear based on his example. Because yeah, he crosses the line sometimes, but he also is helping us to see where even is the line. And he helps us to define that a lot of times because he's past it and then a football field. And we're like, oh yeah, good call. Thanks. The line's back here. Now we know. Thanks, Kanye.
Yeah, especially with all that 10th house energy, he's showing, he's demonstrating. He's helping.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's all about how you look at it. And I know he's had some diagnoses of some different things. And I'm blanking on exactly what he's been diagnosed with as far as maybe bipolar disorder. I hate to even say because I really don't remember, but some energetic instability, I think is what people are recognizing. And he's such a public example of like, he's public, he's on a very public facing stage. And when he's going through like very emotional hard times, like after his mom passed, I think you could see how uncomfortable our culture still was towards mental health issues. Like there was not nearly as much openness or ability to even have a conversation around the struggle that he was going through. There was so much more like judgment of the behavior. And like I saw one thing that was that wind. I saw one thing that was like, you know, if you saw somebody who was like stabbed and bleeding out on the sidewalk, like you would call 911, you would want to help them. But when you see somebody like screaming and yelling obscenities at someone for no good reason, you want to put them in handcuffs and take them to jail. Yeah. But like, it's the same. There's pain, there's wound, they need help. And he has publicly needed help on many occasions. And I think if you look at his outbursts over time, there seems to be a better ability within the culture to talk about it in a way of like getting to the heart of like, dude, like he's a very public example of someone diagnosed with that kind of mental health disorder, if we must call it that. And a lot of people identify in that same vein. So careful how you talk about someone like that, because you're also by extension speaking about people who just identify with that level of emotional volatility. So yeah, it's very interesting for what he's able to reflect on the culture itself.
That is so interesting too. Like I think that's a really, really good point about the way we've seen the mental health public narrative change as he's had sort of different phases very much in the public eye with his own mental health. And that makes me look right at his North Node in Libra and how there is really a sense of justice there, like for the collective, that, you know, like that the public narrative is changing around mental health. And I think that he's honestly played a pretty significant role in that, like just watching the narrative change around the situations with him. And I think that that's such an interesting placement for him to have. I know that he also has been involved in work around like releasing people of color who have been wrongfully convicted from prison. Mm-hmm. That's like some of his advocacy work that he's done. I think like him and when he was married to Kim Kardashian, like they met with Trump when he was president and like had a little like meeting, and I don't know how like legitimate that was, but he has done some like legitimate work around that, which is very much like, that's so Libran, that's so justice based. And especially for it to be in the fourth house, like someone being wrongfully convicted because they're a person of color, or like if that contributed to it in any way, especially like that tears families apart.
Yeah.
You know, like for a loved one to be sent to jail for no good reason.
Yeah.
And that's some really important work for him to be taking his platform, and for it to like bring him back to his roots,
Mm-hmm.
you know, of like fourth house family, where you come from.
Yeah.
Like he's helping the Black community, which is cool in a lot of ways. And he's also just helping the community at large in terms of like mental health things that he gets to highlight for us.
I especially love how, out of the last few episodes we've done, it's been two men who have elicited this conversation about the best and the worst of water energy and emotions, having strong emotions. Like, I love that because I feel like our culture is also shifting around that too, where we understand that humans have emotions. Like, this is not something where we need like men to have a stiff upper lip, or to, be masculine means you can't show your emotions. And I think Kanye is in the position of, there are times, and like right now in the 2007 transits, we see like he had some astrological pressure on a couple significant water placements in his chart. And Mars was also in Cancer at that time, coming up on his ascendant, coming through the end of his 12th house. So he had all three water signs activated. That grand trine gets going. And his outbursts a lot of times let us see the dark side of that water energy taking control. And thankfully, he's never murdered anybody that we know of. That's a good first step for, at least keeping somewhat control of that water energy. But he has had some meltdowns, some public meltdowns where, I mean, I resonate so much, because I'm like, I've had a meltdown that looked just like that. I just didn't happen to have such a public stage where there's paparazzi recording my meltdown and putting it on the evening news. Like, that wasn't part of mine, but I had those intense emotional experiences all the same. So he's doing such a service for putting this energetic instability like out there, because he's been so prolific, like so creative in terms of turning it into music and other things that he's ventured into. But he's not like in complete control of it. Like, he still struggles with keeping control of his energy so that it doesn't overpower him. Like, that creativity comes at a price, almost like that inspiration, where it comes from, like, it can just as easily bring an overwhelming amount of healing through those channels, and pain and suffering that's meant to spark that healing. So he's doing a lot for a lot of things.
He really is.
Just by being, just by being himself.
It's definitely, this has given me like I feel like a much more well-rounded perspective of him. Yeah. Because I mean, it's a really, I feel like it's true that, it's pretty, people say, like a lot of the best art comes from pain and suffering and depression and, like things like that. And so often we're willing to accept all of the fruits of that, like the art that comes from it, the public gets to enjoy. But when the darkness that was the root of that, when that comes out publicly, we're so quick to shut it down and to be like, this person's crazy, whatever, even though we can admit like that's oftentimes where art is born, is in the darkness.
Yeah.
We don't want to see it. Like, I think that's a little unfair, like this, he really gives us kind of the full perspective of like, here's all of the fruits of everything that comes from the struggles he's gone through, but he shows us, I mean, we've seen the struggles too. Yeah. Like, we all have both. that's part of like this godlike power that he's talking about, is, or that he sees in himself, you know, that we could all see in ourselves really if we took a closer look, that with our deepest struggles, like the darkest dark and the lightest light, like this is part of duality, is part of humanity, it's part of life. And whatever spectrum you experience that on, whether it's, you know, a little more mild or if it's more intense, like that's okay, that's your experience and that's your journey, and that's, you know, however you experience that is powerful and divine, godlike, like he says, you know, he knows. I think he maybe is onto something that a lot of us are really willing to see within ourselves, is that I guess godlike energy, divine energy, is not necessarily all light. It's both, you know, like we can't have the light without the dark.
Right. Not in the physical, at least.
No, not here, not here on this earth school. Like that's one of the lessons we're all learning.
That's the whole point.
Duality.
Yeah. And that we have free will and we have power of focus and we get to choose what we give our focus to, and that guides how we feel. And yeah, sometimes our focus gets caught on things that just tear us up on the inside, like loss of a loved one is probably one of the most powerful that can get you stuck in looping around something that feels awful to you. And that's like that grand trine, like it's all harmonious aspects, supportive aspects, nice, well playing together aspects. And at the same time, when the grand trine completes itself, it's almost not a great thing because you can get stuck in there. So that's where all his Taurus energy, I'm sure, helps a lot as far as pulling himself up out of the water and like grounding back into the physical, you know, which is what he'll have to do or has to do in order to like create. You got to come back out of the water. Like you get all the inspiration in there, you get all the nuggets, but then you got to bring them back out to the land and like spread them out and see what you got. I do know, which I thought made a lot of sense for his Gemini, that he probably, I think they said like he has like just as many, if not more, half or unfinished albums that he's just started and discarded along the way as he does finished ones. So even though he's put out like a ton of albums, he's started like twice that many, which is very Gemini in my opinion. Sometimes you have to like burn the first pancake. You have to start a project just to abandon it when something better comes along. Like sometimes you're just keeping yourself entertained in the moment. And then when you recognize like, oh yeah, that's nope, that was then and this is now. And you just leave it. That's where I say like, it's very emotionally uninvolved, very detached. If it's not working, it's not working. Just walk away. And apparently that's very much his motto. He's not afraid to leave it behind. And those have been some of his like, he collaborated like a whole album with somebody and then chose like, this isn't right, we're not going to release this. And the other person who's on the album like, oh okay, I guess we're not releasing that. So yeah, he's not afraid to say like, that's not right, nope, that's not it.
That's so funny. Especially that Saturn and Leo is like, if this doesn't shine the brightest it can, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. It's not happening. You know, there's value in that too. For sure.
A lot of people gave that feedback about him being very like mentor-like to them and like pushing them and like finding a level of performance and talent and creativity that they had never even accessed before. Like Nicki Minaj gave like a whole thing about how she like turned in her part where she was going to be on one of his tracks. And he basically sent it back and was like, rewrite this. This is not your best work. And she like in the moment was like, I can't handle this. No. And then she's like, no, it wasn't. And I rewrote it. And like, we continued working on it. And what ended up being the final version was amazing. And that wouldn't have been the case if it wasn't Kanye willing to tell me like, this is not your best, do it again. And that side of him, I'm like, where's that? Because I want some, like, I want some of that willingness to like, just say the thing that needs said. I wonder if that's his Aries South Node and Midheaven. Seems like it could be.
Definitely a good point where like, yeah, he's willing to say what needs to be said. Yeah. He speaks his mind, you know, because there's also I guess that's his Mercury in Taurus in the 11th. So that's not an Aries, but
Well, but Taurus also is like tied to quality, I think. Like Taurus is our
True.
five senses and
Finer things.
beauty, and yeah, the finer foods, the finer fabrics, the nicest sensual experience you can have is Taurus. And yeah, that commitment to quality. I mean, he's got Mars, Venus, Chiron, Mercury, plus Saturn in the second house. Like he just knows, like either it's good enough or we're still working on it.
Yeah.
And not opposed to doing the Taurus like one step at a time, like iterating thousands of hours on some of those albums, like going back and forth, making little changes until it's just right. And wow, like he's definitely got like his own internal compass for quality and excellence. And to me, that feels like Taurus in the second house. And that stubborn, fixed energy of telling somebody else that their work isn't their best work and that they should redo it.
Yeah.
I love that. Like, that's just like, I wish I could do a little bit more of that,
Yeah.
and not get all caught up in worrying about how the other person's going to take it. Because at the end of the day, that Taurus commitment to quality, like we're committed to the quality of the work. It's not personal. We want the best possible product at the end of this. And that means you need to redo your part. So you do your part, it's not personal. It's about the quality of the end result. And that seems to be part of his success. Like part of his trade secrets is that commitment to excellence.
Definitely.
Like listening to people talk about working with him, like they all have basically the same story, that he's a very hard worker. He'll go into the studio for like 7 days solid and just be in there doing all the like very creative, like the spurts of energy that creative people have.
Yeah, so he has all that water energy, but he clearly doesn't let it control him, especially not in the realm of like his work and the products he puts out to the world. I mean, even like Yeezys, his shoes.
Yeah.
Don't really know that much about it, but like people are really into that. They're very expensive. They're like very high quality, and that's the only thing he's willing to have associated with his brand, like himself as a brand, which is again kind of going back to that inflated sense of ego, is like to maybe see yourself as like a brand. And like he's not willing to have nothing subpar is going to be associated with his brand,
Yeah.
And if you're associated with him, that includes you and the work that you contribute.
Right. For serious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes, I mean, it sounds a lot like Donald Trump. I would be very interested to, like, in terms of having your brand and the Trump name and like all of that. Like,
Totally.
I know Trump's sun is also in Gemini, Sun, S-U-N. I don't know about the rest of it, but
yeah. And then there's Melania with a lot of Taurus. I remember we peaked at that one time, and Melania's Taurus going on, so she wants the finer things and it's
all about that green stuff. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I wonder how that's working out for, because that's how the shadow side of Earth energy works, is that you think it's the physical stuff and it's not. You can be the richest man on the planet and still feel insecure, because insecurity is something inside of us. And like having a lot of money doesn't change that. If we feel like we're not enough, having a bunch of money in the bank like doesn't correct that. So,
and that's interesting too. Just, I mean, like I just remembered that situation with Kanye West and Taylor Swift, where he like got on the stage and was like, I don't think Taylor Swift deserves this award.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, I think he said like it should have gone to Beyonce or something like that. And like I guess, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure what the point of that was, but I can also see like with that energy going on, how like the insecurity of sometimes the result of insecurity is trying to tear other people down.
Yes.
And I mean, like I know his marriage with Kim Kardashian just failed, and who even knows why that happened or what happened.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't leave insecurity out of the equation. That tends to ruin relationships. And he's been somewhat public
with that Chiron in Taurus. It's like he Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you're up against with Chiron and Taurus is like you don't feel physically good enough. And that is a deep well that can be hard, can like you get sucked into it when your physical reality starts to affirm that that's true. And then you're like, oh shit, and you try to fix it in the physical reality. And it's just, that's not how that works. But I wanted to move it back to the transits for right now. So these are for today at the time we're recording this, February 17th. So North Node is like right on his Mercury, and he is really going to town on saying some things, calling some people out, and like there's all kinds of drama everywhere about him right now. So that's really interesting. Plus, that Mercury, like this Mercury in general, was kind of what I thought of when you were talking about that, what he said about Taylor Swift. Like for Mercury in the 11th house, that's like associated with an Aquarius where you're kind of on the outside forming your own opinion. And then there's also this like Mercury in Taurus, where again, we go back to that commitment for quality. It just makes me think he legit thought he was right, that like the final product of what she put out compared to what she put out, like this is the right one. And from his vantage point, he thinks that that opinion like needs to be heard, when that's like, that's the part that's really interesting. That like, why? Even if you thought that, why are you actually going up on stage? But that's where what you said about insecurity, like he needed to voice that opinion because he was maybe so shocked that he was wrong. I'll bet he had already shared his opinion that she's a clear winner, she's a clear choice, like her work stands apart from everybody else. And then that's not how it went. He was wrong. And to shore up himself, maybe this is all my hypothesizing.
Yeah.
So that's right now. What else he got going on right now? These guys are like right on his descendant.
Just thinking that. Yeah, that's very interesting.
And Jupiter will be soon to his moon.
Okay, so there's like probably a lot going on for him emotionally.
Well, and like look at, because you have, I mean, Neptune and Jupiter, the traditional ruler and the modern ruler of Pisces are both in Pisces right now, which is like a once in a lifetime thing for them to be there at the same time. So that's activating water, the Pisces energy big time. Plus the South Node just entered Scorpio a few weeks ago. So that's activating the Scorpio end. Not much going on in Cancer yet, but I'll bet you like by the summer, when we got all like, the sun and Mercury and Venus and everything going through Cancer, where it's lighting up that entire grand trine, I wouldn't be surprised if he's having a hard time again. Like right now, you can see like some things that are, he's definitely acting out, but he's more just like almost trolling. He's just like being mouthy a little bit, like saying a lot of opinions. And yeah, like I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I really haven't kept up that closely, but like, it seems like since his divorce from Kim Kardashian and walking away from that whole situation and that family, like, he's had a lot to say. Like, he's like just kind of saying whatever he wants about all of them now. And like, it just brings me back again to like the insecurity piece of tearing other people down, because I'm sure that they are like talking shit about him too. And it's maybe not the best look to like get divorced from such a public, like another figure who's arguably maybe even more famous than he is, like, I don't know if he likes that. He's like, let me keep this spotlight going on for myself. But I don't know, like he seems to kind of be like trying to tear people down around him. Or maybe he's trying to like be like a whistleblower, like telling truth or something. Like he couldn't like he couldn't voice that while he was in the middle of this family, but now that he's on the outside of it, like maybe he feels like he can say what he really experienced or what he really feels is true, which is kind of like with the Taylor Swift thing. Like if that's really what he felt like was true, he felt a really strong need to communicate that publicly.
Yeah, which is just crazy because his Mercury is barely talking to anything. But I wonder, at the time of the Taylor Swift thing, did he have something sitting right on top of it that was like activating that energy? Yeah. Also, as you were talking about, I forget which part sparked this, but it made me want to see like losing the spotlight kind of thing and like getting it back. I wanted to see where's his Saturn, because like that whole Saturn and Leo thing, like it needs the spotlight to
Yeah.
function properly. And he is just finishing his Saturn opposition. So we have our Saturn return in late 20s. And then in another 15 years, we go through our Saturn opposition. And then right before age 60, we have our second Saturn return. So like Saturn at 12 degrees of Aquarius would have been his exact Saturn opposition. So we're only a few degrees past that at this point. So he's having that pressure on, yeah, like the spotlight and the attention that you're getting and the kinds of attention that you're getting. And like, what are you doing? Like right now, that's my question, is like, what are you doing? And with the things that he's saying, and he's like picking fights with people. And it's like, that's kind of flailing behavior that kind of points me back to what's going on with your water energy. How are your feelings? Because it seems like not great. Seems like a secure, stable, nurtured, loved, happy person doesn't pick fights with people like this. So what's going on? You know, what's the deeper story here, Kanye? Talk to me.
Especially since he has all those kids involved now. Like him and Kim Kardashian had a bunch of kids.
Like 4, I think.
Yeah, like at least.
Which I had no idea. Like
lot, all via like surrogacy, which is like not really even relevant to this conversation. So I don't have anything to add about that. But like, I just wonder if that, like emotions run even deeper when like you have your own offspring involved, and like a larger sense of ego when you have kids. That's pretty easy to put onto them and to see them as like an extension of your own self and your own ego. And now that like, I mean, in a divorce, like they're a part of this situation. Like this is your children now that we're talking about too, your family. And so I can see how like emotions can run even deeper here and get even more triggered. Yeah.
Which he's got a lot going on in the 4th house as far as like Pluto, wherever it is like deep wounding, deep trauma from a past life that was in that area of life. And this time you're here more to heal that. Plus he's got his North Node right there too. And that's like, you want to develop that side of yourself. And it just kind of reminds me like back to Pluto in Libra, like a sense of injustice in a past life towards you yourself. Plus Pluto in the 4th house is like family karma from a past life, like not feeling like you fit in with your family before. And I know he had like a really intense and meaningful relationship with his mom, which Pluto also kind of governs like our deepest fears. And so losing someone that you have such an intimate relationship with, or such like a supportive relationship with, that would be incredibly painful. So yeah, all that in the 4th house, like he's got work to do in terms of family and loving himself through that, caring for himself through hard times, and being there for the people that he loves. And yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how he continues to do this. I'm glad that he has come out with some of his mental health diagnoses. I'm hoping that means like he's getting help and he's feeling supported by people who can support him and, help him deal with how intense his energy is just by design, in a way that's working for him, that's supportive for him. So
definitely. And he's really helped to bring, I think, over time, more compassion to that subject, which is really desperately needed and is like the direction the collective is headed in. And I think it's, partially thanks to him. So there's been a lot of public benefit to him having this internal battle, what really is so personal, having that be public. Like imagine having a really intense emotional event and having it be like broadcast to the whole world. That's pretty intense. So
and then all the T channels make their videos and like it spreads, it just multiplies. Yeah, no, I get you. I'm very grateful that it was only a couple of people who witnessed me have my worst emotional moments, not the whole freaking world to be able to Google later on the internet for all of history. So yeah, thank you, Kanye, for that sacrifice that you're making, because I agree, like he brings he brings a lot of things to the forefront and helps us to consider them, hopefully in a new way. Go Kanye, go Kanye. Hope you're taking good care of yourself.
Seriously. See what he does next.
That's all we can hope, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's just a
Take
person.
good care.
We're all
Yeah.
just people.
Yeah.
You know, like he's just a
For real.
person, and it's so easy to like with famous people and people in so much in the public eye, we can build them up to be these like, I don't know, like institutions in themselves, but they're a singular person. They're just a human being just like us. And it's really easy to like spiral with, I don't know, we place so much on famous people. It's like people too, you know.
Well, and just in general, I think it's easy to do that as humans because it's always going to be easier to like dissect what's wrong with other people than ourselves, you know, the turning inward and trying to be like, why am I so deeply upset by Kanye or whatever it is, or whatever, you know, that you're blaming this person, they're crazy, they're wrong, they're whatever. But it's like, yeah, I mean, they're triggering something inside of us and giving us an opportunity to look at it. So
yeah. And it's not wrong in itself, I think, to do that with famous people, to kind of like pick them apart before, like they serve as mirrors. And we've seen in a lot of people's charts, like famous people's charts, that like they're built for this, you know, like they were meant to be in the public eye and to experience these things publicly for the rest of us. Like that's why it's a service to the collective for them to go through this so publicly, is because everyone else, like I'm sure it's a really brutal experience to have the whole world picking you apart, but that's how usually it starts there before we get to turn that inward, because we generally don't recognize these things. Sometimes we need something in someone to show us. And then we can see it in ourselves. So they're doing a really great service. I'm sure it's a difficult experience, but one that they signed up for nonetheless, you know, like we all chose not necessarily the exact life we're living, but we chose who we wanted to be in this life, what our energetic makeup was going to be, and kind of set some parameters for ourselves of like, this is what I want to do. This is the goal that I have for this life. And yeah, it seems very purposeful to me.